Morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed a privilege for me to be here as coordinator from the three institutes: the Center for Advanced Strategic Studies, the Pune International Center, and of course the Maratha Chamber where we are at the moment. And the past president is here, Maratha Chamber, Dr. Abhay Firodia, and very distinguished crowd, and I'm very glad to introduce you a very famous personality. I think many of you whosoever I've spoken to have said that they have seen her on the YouTube and read a lot of books of hers. But I'm going to do a very brief introduction before I hand over for her presentation. Dr. Christine Fair obtained a doctorate from the University of Chicago, Department of South Asian Languages and Civilization in 2004, and an MA from Harris School of Public Policy in 1997. Prior to joining the Security Studies program within Georgetown University, she served as a senior political scientist in Rand Corporation, a political officer to the United Nations Assistant Mission in Afghanistan, and as a senior research associate at the Center for Conflict Analysis and Prevention. Her research focuses upon political and military affairs in South Asia. She has authored, co-authored and co-edited several books and written a number of articles. There is so many books, but there are so many wonderful titles. I thought I'll read a few of them. The Madrasa Challenges. And as you know, that last 2 days when we were discussing in our Pune Dialogue on National Security, one of the topics, this was very well discussed, this madrasas, and our policy about the right to education. And she's a member of International Institute of Strategic Studies, Council on Foreign Relations, and many things that she's involved in, including a very ardent lover of canine dogs. And she has a wonderful 3 pups, is that right? Her latest book, I think most of us have read, is Fighting to the End, Pakistan Army's Way of War, released in 2014. Yeah, there you are. So, she's going to speak to us. I had requested her a topic which is there in front of you. The current state of Pakistan with emphasis on growing Pakistan-China nexus. And she's agreed to speak to us and take the Q&A after that. So over to Christine.
Thank you guys so much for having me. So thank you for Mr. Soni. We met years ago in Afghanistan. So this is really fun. I haven't been to Pune, in many years, like since 1997. It's unrecognizable. So this is great fun being here. I think I would like to be perhaps a kuta, rakshak, if that were possible. So if I win the lottery, I will start a kuta sanctuary. All right. So I'm actually going to be brief about this topic so that we can have a larger discussion. I'm happy to talk about Pakistan in generally. Sort of came up at the last minute, and I kind of threw this presentation together. But I'll be kind of brief so that we can have more Q&A about it. So if I could I just changed the slides by this arrow. Okay, awesome. All right, so you can probably tell from the title, CPEC, Colonizing Pakistan to Enrich China, that I'm sort of skeptical about what CPEC is and what the benefits are that the Chinese are promising to the Pakistanis. So I'm sure most of you have heard of CPEC. I've seen there's been a lot of coverage about it in the news. I wanted to sort of give you a sense. This is a map from The Economist. I didn't make this map. But I wanted to give you a sense of where CPEC is situated in the overview of Chinese lines of communication. So you guys have all heard about the One Belt, One Road. So CPEC, which is, this is actually terribly drawn, because it's actually supposed to go through water. There's actually, I think what you actually want to do is do the view. Do full screen. Full screen. Yeah, Haji, yahan pe. I mean full screen. Yahan pe. Alhamdulillah. So this map, or as I like to say, Al Puta do Puta, which, sorry, I'm going straight to hell. So actually, the CPEC part of this map is not entirely correct. It's supposed to go down to water. another piece, another spur that I'll show you in a minute that goes off to Iran. But this gives you a sense that CPEC is really just one spur in this larger vision of Chinese lines of control that connects China throughout Southeast Asia, Southwest Asia, North Africa, and the rest of Europe. So I think it's important to understand it in that context. This is a part of, I don't like to say Chinese hegemony, but the larger strategy of Chinese engagement. It's also important to sort of look at it in the context of its neighborhood. So this shows what they're calling the southern corridor in the context of these other corridors. So if you were to actually, so this is Gwadar Port and this is Kashgar. So in the context of this region, the goals of China are actually a couple-fold. First, as you know, they have issues with the Uyghurs in Xinjiang. And so their hope is that by integrating Xinjiang with the rest of this region, they can literally integrate Uyghurs. So what they're trying to do in Xinjiang is what they did in Tibet. So they're trying to bring these different lines of control or lines of communication to bear on Xinjiang. And their other hope is that by bringing economic integration with Pakistan, that they can provide security, or that they can basically increase the security in South Asia. Why are they doing this? Because the Uyghurs, as I'm sure you know, have sanctuary in Pakistan and in Afghanistan. They have ties to Al-Qaeda, the Afghan Taliban, and also the Pakistani Taliban. So by integrating Pakistan, and this is, by the way, why some Pakistanis in the Pak military are actually not so thrilled about CPEC, China can actually put leverage on Pakistan in a way that the Americans cannot, right? So the Americans don't actually put pressure on the Pakistanis. We pretty much write a free check, and then we complain, right? I mean, very blunt. I'm the biggest critic of my country next to Pakistan. You can't criticize what Pakistan does without criticizing the enabler, right? And I go back to dog training. For those of you who have dogs and the dog jumps up on you, you ignore the dog. You don't give it treats when it jumps up on you. And in this case, we're actually rewarding Pakistan every time it kills one of our soldiers in Afghanistan. Basic dog training 101, that's called incentivizing ill behavior. So what the Chinese are hoping to do is actually incentivize good behavior. By creating an infrastructure that Pakistan actually needs, they can then, actually this is how China works with Pakistan. They'll say if you don't do X, then we won't do Y, right? You need energy unless you control the Uyghurs on your territory. We are not going to do these things for you. So it's a very different way of engaging them than the ways in which the Americans do. So these are generally some of the goals of CPEC. Does that make sense? Any questions? No, feel free to ask questions as we go, especially if I'm not clear. All right. Yes.
Can you use the mic? We can't hear you.
Oh, can you?
Yeah, now.
It's okay now?
Yeah.
All right, so basically, let's just to recap for those that you didn't hear it, one of the goals that the Chinese have with CPEC is that by making Pakistan dependent upon their investments, they can coerce Pakistan to put pressure on the Uyghurs to make sure that Pakistan is not a sanctuary that they can use to then attack China. Now, so this is actually what the Chinese and the Americans are very similarly flawed in our approach. Neither us nor the Chinese are saying, stop having terrorist sanctuaries, right? So both of us, both the United States and China, we're still incentivizing Pakistan to have terrorists, right? Then the minute Pakistan no longer has terrorists, it can't extract rents from either the Chinese or the Americans. I think the Chinese are better than we are, but they still have the fundamental problem is that no one is saying, we are going to kick the living tuckion out of you until you stop producing terrorists, right? They're better, but they're still not great. But that's one of the goals of CPEC, is to make Pakistan increasingly beholden to Chinese interests in a way that the Americans never did. And so if you actually read Pakistani newspapers, you'll actually find people expressing the doubt that I have, that this is about colonizing Pakistan. And even some of Pakistan's security elites are concerned, because at the end of the day, if you look at how China's been behaving towards India over the last several decades, China's closer to India on many strategic issues than it is on Pakistan, right? China has kept its mouth shut about Kashmir. China hasn't supported Pakistan's position on Kashmir since the mid-90s. So even Pakistan is worried about what its future is going to be with China. The Pakistanis are not viewing this necessarily as a free lunch, which is why if you read the Pakistani newspapers, there's a lot of questions and there's a lot of grousing about it. But let me give you, so this is a horrible map because it's made in Pakistan. And it's like, no, I don't mean it that way. It's just like, it's this graphic overload. It's like, the PowerPoint skills, and let's make this line hot pink. Okay, that works. All right, but, and you also can't terribly tell which one of these are new lines of communication and which one of these are old. So basically, what I want you to understand is that much of CPEC is not about building a new road, right? It's about consolidating or expanding roads that are already there. And particularly, I was watching the Indian press, there's a lot of concern about this stuff up here through Gilgit. This isn't new, right? This is the Karakoram Highway. It's been there since the 60s. This was the flagship program between Pakistan and China after they ceded territory, right? So this isn't new. And I'm going to give you some more pictures about what this looks like here in a few minutes. This isn't new. But what they're planning on doing is widening some of these highways, and I've driven most of these highways. Actually, they're not bad. They're pretty good. And remember, all of the war material that we have used in Afghanistan have been transported on this axis. What they are doing, and this is the part that's going to be new, is that they're building, and there's some disputes because the road that this is going to be is actually going to be a 2-lane metal road, right? So Baloch are like, why do we get the crappy road? Well, because you're Balochis, you're Baloch. That's why they don't care about you. But, which is another issue with CPEC, right? So this is going to be new, and the idea is that you're going to connect water to Quetta. You're going to have this spur that then connects to Iran, and then this spur goes to Chaman, where presumably it's going to link up with the ring road. And then you have this spur that goes to Di Khan, right? And then you I pity the fool who has to build these roads. This is going to go through NWP. Notice that it's obviously not going through FATA for a number of reasons that should be evident. And then once you get up to Peshawar, then you can go through Torkham, and again you get into Afghanistan. So that's the logic. So for water to be maximally profitable, for it to be the shortest route to the rest of Asia, this has to be a functioning spur. Right? You guys get that? Because if they're putting crap on or off at water, and they're moving it to Karachi, or this way, that's not the shortest route. Now I hope you all appreciate the geographical challenges. Where is this spur going through? It's going through Balochistan. We all know what's happening in Balochistan. Baloch are not happy about this because they're not getting these jobs. And I'm going to talk about the contracting in a minute. So if you're thinking about the economic maximization of the value of this GLOC, it's only if this thing happens. And I'm going to argue that this is very unlikely to happen over any policy-relevant future because of the security issues, which I'm also going to talk about. And the other thing I want to, and there's actually some statistics that might actually be useful to also give you a couple of other things. All right. So about 35 billion of the 46 billion that China has allocated for this CPEC project is actually going to go to energy products, energy projects. And so it includes coal, it includes hydroelectric, it includes an LNG, includes solar, basically every kind of energy project possible. And in fact, there's about 21 new projects that will, if this thing actually happens, will generate about 17,000 megawatts of energy, which will actually double Pakistan's installed capacity. One huge caveat is that you know about Pakistan's circular debt. So these energy projects are going to be financed separately, so that they're not part of the circular debt problem. One thing I will say is that it's very difficult difficult to actually get information about this because it's not been discussed publicly. And that's because of the nature of the contracting. It's all done on a government-to-government basis. The Chinese are selecting the firm. There's a very opaque, I won't even call it a bidding process, right? Because there's a bidding process, you could actually evaluate the cost performance of the proposals. So essentially, the Chinese are setting the price, they're hiring the firms, they're doing the labor, and the Pakistanis are going to foot the bill. Which is why, again, colonizing Pakistan to, economically benefit China might be a better description of this. So there are a couple of problems with this, apart from security. One is execution. So the recent rate of Chinese execution is really low. So Andrew Small, a book, by the way, he's written the best book on Pakistan-Chinese relations. You absolutely have to read it. He's really a sinologist by training, so he speaks Mandarin. He spent a lot of time in China. He's also spent a lot of time in Pakistan and India. It's really the best book on this subject. So according to his numbers, between 2001 and 2011, China only executed 6% of its promises. All right, so, and by the way, one of the things that really frustrates me with Pakistan's media is that they are always told to play up the all-weather friendship of China. In fact, China hasn't been an all-weather friend in a very long time. Like, it really didn't do anything for them, the 65 war, the 71 war, Cargill war. It mostly gives them loan aid, not grant aid. It gives them really crappy weapons so that it feels emboldened to take pungas with you. But it doesn't actually want Pakistan to go to war with you because then it has to reveal its hands that it's not prepared to do anything, right? So from China's point of view, it wants to use Pakistan to keep this relationship troublesome, but not so troublesome that you actually go to war, because that doesn't suit Pakistan at all. And the media efforts that Pakistan is forced to go through to make Pakistanis believe that China is this all-weather friend, it's really quite amazing. Like years ago, when I was teaching in Lahore on LUMS, and I think it was a CNBC interview, which is it's a private outlet. The talking head asked me, well, why can't you guys be more like the Chinese? I said, oh yeah, that's great. Loan aid instead of grant aid, crappy weapon systems, use you to keep India, blah, blah, blah. She cut the interview right away, and she went to a commercial break. And she said, you can't talk about China like this. I said, then don't ask me a stupid question like this, because I'm going to give you an answer like that, because that's actually the fact. So much effort goes into hiding the fact that China is actually a fairly worthless ally in the scheme of things. And anyone who's seen China's business model in action knows that if you actually imagine them executing this to scale, things are going to go south. Already as it is, when the Chinese are doing these projects in Pakistan, Pakistanis don't like them and they don't like Pakistanis. They live in colonies and racism is palpable. Their eating habits principally involve my favorite animal, pork. Not so great for the Pakistanis. And they're the ones that principally get the jobs. So again, Pakistan foots the bill, but many of the benefits, the long-term benefits, are actually accruing to China. And Pakistan has no way of knowing whether or not the bill that it's footing is even the right bill for this project. The other issue, which I'm sure you've heard about, and particularly with the true effort, and I can't believe I'm saying this, President Zardari, he actually did a couple of good things while he was enriching himself. The federalism that Pakistan is really trying to execute means that the Punjab simply can't exert its will as it used to. Now, all of the provinces want a part of this pie. And so if, again, you're reading the Pakistani press, there's a lot of arguments about the alignment, specifically the communities that these roads pass through. And the grouses are one of two sorts. Why isn't it going through my community? And the other is, why is it going through my community, right? Because if it's going through your community, you're going to be displaced, right? So if you happen to have farmland and there's a road that goes through it, sorry, it sucks to be you, and it's not clear what the compensatory mechanisms are going to be when you are so displaced. On the other hand, long term, when that road comes through a community, it brings with it certain economic opportunities. Now, I'm very skeptical about this, by the way. So I've been traveling. I can't go back now. I'm very PNG. It's like being very pregnant. I guess you're just sort of PNG. There's no such thing. I remember when I used to take the GT road. The GT road was absolutely laced with every possible business, right? You had the dudes that fix your tires, because your tires were always going to break in the GT road. You had every imaginable type of dhaba, gas stations. Now when you drive the motorway, it's absolutely vacant of these kinds of businesses. You'll have these large, like the Peacock, where you get really lousy, tea bag tea, semi-passable, edible kebabs. So I'm actually very skeptical about the businesses that these large motorways bring, because what they're actually doing is that they're undercutting the businesses that have basically sprouted up around these older systems of roads. And so people are rightly skeptical about what the cost benefit is. Now, obviously, if you're a driver or if you run a shipping company, you benefit from this, right? Because these roads are much more passable. The time cut is the time shaved off of your travel is really important. But you can see very quickly why you might be skeptical about what the local benefits are once this road is actually built. Now, the other thing I'm going to talk about very briefly, in particular, is about water, because I'm going to spend quite a bit of time talking about what water is and what it cannot be. So, water has been a long-standing bone of contention for the Baloch. The Baloch are very concerned, and rightly so actually, that they are being displaced as the majority in their own province. So the survey work that I did in Pakistan suggests they're already not the majority anymore. In fact, Pashtuns, not Punjabis, are displacing them. And that's for a bunch of reasons. Obviously, migration from Afghanistan. And there were always Pashtuns in Balochistan. So this is not a new thing. It doesn't date back to the 80s. It's actually their, pre-partition Pashtun settlements in Balochistan, and they seem to be growing at a higher rate in addition to migration in from Afghanistan. So for Gwadar to be what the Chinese and the Pakistanis are telling you to scare the tatiyan out of you to be, the expectation is it's going to be a population that goes from 80,000 to 2 million. All right, that's a huge amount of growth. But again, if you read the local Pakistani press, there's a dirty little secret. There's no water. There isn't. Right now, the water shortage in Gwadar is so severe that people are actually bringing water in on the backs of camels and donkeys. Right? So and remember what most of Balochistan is. It's sort of desertine. So unless they build a desalinization plant, where are they going to get the water to support this thing that they are, terrifying everyone with? And so unless they can figure out that, unless they can figure out how they make Baloch stakeholders into this is not going to happen anytime soon. And I'm going to show you some pictures of Gwadar in a few minutes, and so you'll see where I'm coming from. To deal with this security issue, because, in addition, there's also going to be these economic zones. We'll talk a bit more about those in a few minutes. To deal with the security, because the Chinese know that they're going to be under attack, because they are under attack. So to deal with the security, because the Chinese are very concerned. Remember some of the first beheadings that happened? Actually, Chinese engineers were beheaded. They're building a CPEC security force. Numbers vary. I've seen 10,000. I've seen larger figures. That can't happen overnight, right? They're going to cannibalize some forces. Over time, they can grow it. But it's not clear to me that they're going to have, I call it the CPEC security farce. I don't really quite understand how 10,000 is going to be, or even 20,000 is going to be enough to protect all of these Chinese projects, particularly when you get to a place like Balochistan where the population density is so low. To me, this seems very infeasible. But they'll have to figure that out. Or not. All right, so I'm going to then anchor this discussion on what I call the 2 choke points, because all of the security and political issues prevail throughout the middle. So I'm going to try to focus, for the purposes of brevity, upon what I think are these 2 choke points. So you remember in 2010, maybe you didn't know, I don't know, there was this huge landslide on the KKH. And it basically, and gotta love the Pakistanis' ingenuity, they just decided to call it a lake. It's like, make a margarita out of a really crappy lemon. I'm behind that, even though you actually need a lime to make a margarita properly. But let's just call it we'll call it Atabon. And this was enormously problematic because let me tell you how they were then doing transport. This. Okay, this is CPEC, ladies and gentlemen. CPEC. So this is a vehicle, and you can obviously, you're limited in how much traffic can traverse Lake Atabad when you're having these ferries. This one here somehow has managed to get 4 jingle trucks. But what I want you to notice with these jingle trucks, they're just like Indian jingle trucks, right? They're completely packed over the top, a couple Punjabi dudes riding on the top. These are not, I'm not being facetious. Like you've seen them, and you worry about them making a turn and flipping over, because they do. What you don't see in these jingle trucks, they are not at full capacity. So part of me almost wonders if this was just see, we can put jingle trucks on the ferry. Because what you don't see is actually the degree of content in them, which is typical. This would not be a feasible way to move jingle trucks across CPEC. So I think this was a photo op rather than a real event. And similarly, this jingle truck has nothing in it. All right, so then last year, they were finally able to open up this Atabad bypass. And of course, long live Pak-China friendship. And here everyone is offering prayer, alhamdulillah, that we have this worked out. From my point of view, this is a very lovely bombing target. I didn't say that, really.
What did you do?
This part isn't, but these really are nicely bombable. Get some PGMs in there and watch it on, okay. I have a birthday coming up. Does anyone want to bomb that? Alhamdulillah. Okay, so they fixed it, sort of. But here's the hideous truth, and I've been on this road. I did it once. I'll never do it again. This is what most of the road looks like. You guys have roads like this too. These are not uncommon. When you blow up a mountain to make a road, shit happens. Sorry for the vernacular. And this is a very typical landslide. I've been on landslides in the KKH, and you're just like, oh, mashallah, I wasn't there 20 minutes ago. And you look down these ravines, and you see all of the jingle trucks and buses that have now gone to paradise and have their virgins or raisins, depending upon your interpretation of the Quran. So what that lovely, gorgeous photo op did was fix the Atabad problem, but it doesn't fix this quotidian problem. So part of CPAC is that the Chinese want to widen this. But you can just see from the geography that this is not going to be trivial. Right? How do you actually widen this when you have a mountain hanging over your head? Now, if I were a military planner, apart from bombing the bridge, I would just make some landslides. Because this is Mother Nature. You can't defeat her. She's very grouchy. And so there's just really no way that they're going to be able to overcome this issue. And to go back to some of the concerns that I've seen in the Indian press, this was built in the 60s. And I'm sure you have seen this. If you've ever done pilgrimages, you'll have a big landslide. The bus goes to one side of the landslide, everyone gets off, and then you get on the other bus and you get charged twice. So it's a very nice rapid as well, until the landslide gets cleared. So at least on that northern choke point, I don't know how they're really going to fix this, because this as itself was an engineering challenge, and it's just going to take a long time. I'm very, very skeptical. All right, so if anyone wants this article, send me an email, or I can send it to you folks, and you can send it forward. So Pakistan, they've learned the art of the embedded journalist. Okay, it's important that you understand the context to understand these pictures. So in their effort to colonize Pakistanis, they sent a bunch of journalists embedded with the Pakistan Navy, and the whole goal was to convince these fellows, because I believe they were all fellows, that this is just awesome, and this is a foundational element of their national security. So this guy, actually, I can't believe he was allowed to continue writing after he zaleeled the Pak Navy in this piece. He's like, I'm an embedded journalist, we're supposed to see how awesome CPEC is, We went to Gwadar and we saw nothing. Now, I want you to understand the context. The Navy has arranged to bring a bunch of Pakistani journalists to see how amazing Gwadar is. These are the pictures that he took and he published as a part of his embedded journalist blog. Can you tell me what you don't see?
Ships.
Ships. No one wants to park a canoe here. So in fact, it has been so problematic finding anyone that will use this that the Singaporeans gave up the management of it because they were losing money. And so the Chinese eventually took it over. So there are some figures that I think are actually kind of unpalatably insane, but I'm going to give them to you because they are the official numbers. Let's see, do I actually have it? Yes, here we go. In 2016, the total traffic was 500,000 tons. Okay, that's Gwadar for you. Not exactly, right? The optimists, and I think they're crazed, think that this is going to grow to 300 to 400 million tons in 2017. Sure. And those are the same people that say that Gwadar is going to go from 80,000 people to 2 million people in a place where there is no water. All right. So I've already talked about some of the Baloch outrages, so I don't think I need to dilate upon that further. But one of the problems that really structurally disadvantage of the Baloch, and this is a circular problem, is that, and I've done so much data collection on this, there's a whole other side about Baloch views towards political Islam, which I'm happy to talk about if there's interest. They aren't as secular as everyone says they are. In fact, in terms of support for Al-Qaeda, Lashkar-e-Jhangvi, Lashkar-e-Taiba, they look just like a Punjabi. The only way they differ is that they vote differently. But on every other issue, they look just like a Punjabi. And I've got large N data to back that up. Not 200, I've got thousands of randomly selected observations that back up that conclusion. But not only because for so long the Pakistani budget award gave them budgets based upon their population, not upon their need, they remain cyclically underdeveloped. At the level of the Baloch province, when they get that federal award, they can't even execute it. All right, so good luck with this Azadi, my Baloch friends. If you can't even exercise a budget, you're probably not going to be very good at running a country. So this means that most Baloch, educationally, are not qualified for these jobs. So, I'm actually sympathetic to the Punjabis that go and teach in Balochistan, because if there were no Punjabi teachers, there wouldn't be teachers at all, right? So in any effort to develop Balochistan is going to require human capital from the outside. Unfortunately, I don't see a lot of effort to increase the human capital of Balochistan. The Army's approach to doing this is that they've been setting up cadet colleges. The Army has actually been quite successful at expanding their recruitment in Balochistan. So now, there's obviously problems with that, but there is also a cycle of virtuosity, because where the Pakistan Army goes, there are cantonments, which means there's gas hookups, there's electricity, there are better schools, and there are better hospitals. And where officers retire, and they're encouraging officers to retire there, you then have communities who can actually help people figure out how you get into the PMA, right? So you have communities of influencers. Like my brothers are military recruiters. The best predictor of whether an area is going to produce enlisted or an officer is if that area already has an officer or an enlisted there. So it looks like the Army is colonizing Balochistan, but actually the Army has a different way of thinking about this. The Army thinks that if they can expand recruitment from Balochistan, that they will enfranchise Baloch. Because one of the problems with the Pak Army is that you basically run the country, right? You run it and you ruin it. So if not everyone has equal opportunities to steal from the country, then you have disgruntlement. So Baloch don't have those opportunities to steal and the capacity of being in the military, and so they are disgruntled. So the Army's approach is, let's give everyone more opportunities to steal the country from the sanctity of a uniform. But there will be positive externalities over time. But these are some of the very serious long-term impediments of them being able to bring Baloch into this economic enterprise, which in turn is going to perpetuate the security concerns that are going to rate limit the development of this entire project. So let's just summarize this. The challenges, I think, are pretty straightforward. Security, security, security. The political constraints, you have so much infighting from the center and the provinces and between the provinces and within the provinces about the alignment of these economic zones, where you're going to see these roads being placed, the location of the energy projects and so forth. As I said, geography and Mother Nature really constrains that northern choke point. And I just don't see that being dealt with realistically in any relevant future. You just can't widen the KKH quickly because of the enormity of the engineering challenge. And then obviously the politics, insurgency, and resource constraints and competition are going to limit not only the southern choke point, but that's going to be something that factors all the way throughout CPEC. And the way in which the Chinese are conducting the contracting, the Pakistanis don't have a lot of say in this. And so the Pakistanis split the bill, but it's not clear that the bill is the right-sized bill. So what can we realistically expect from this? I think the energy is low-hanging fruit. And I don't think this is an issue that anyone should be concerned about. Right? Pakistan has a 2% growth rate, and their economy is shambolic. And their economy is shambolic because they don't have electricity. Right? So if you're a manufacturer, you actually have to have your own power generation. If you're a small manufacturer or if you run a small shop, you need to have a generator. Right? So this is an incredibly expensive way to do business. Anything that involves sewing, which Pakistan wants to compete with Bangladesh on clothing products. How do you do that when your sewers only have light for a certain number of days, and depending upon what part of the year you have more light or less light, but what you don't have is electricity. So the energy projects, I think, are low-hanging fruit, and we all benefit actually from Pakistan having a better economy that can actually create more job employment. No one benefits from having these duffers lounging around jobless. The economic zones are possible if they sort out two things. A, the electricity issue, because if you don't have electricity, there's no economic zones. And then, of course, that the political issues about their placement are resolved. I'm more concerned about both of these, right? Because, again, Chinese execution isn't all that inspiring, and the political issues, just read the Pakistani press to see the moaning and groaning about this. The road infrastructure is something that may improve. That's low-hanging fruit, and I think a lot of people will benefit from this. Let me talk very briefly about rail. Oh, you guys are so lucky you have a functioning railway system here. All right. You guys take it for granted that you can go online and you can book your tickets. And what's it called? Is it Takal, the scene? What is it? Takal. Okay. You guys live in luxury. Luxury. So Pakistan doesn't have electronic booking. I want you to think about that for a second. Like some dude, you go, and it's a dude, always a dude, you go to this really ratty station and he looks at a big book, just like you guys did in the 70s. That's Pakistan. The Canadians, after, some 30 years of haggling, brought an electronic reservation system. It lasted 3 months. No, seriously. So Pakistan is back to where you were in the 1970s. And let me give you a couple of... No. Oh, I know the issue is it's not plugged in. That's why it's going to sleep. All right, so we'll just be very, very brief. Let me just give you some inventory issues. Right now, Pakistan Railways has fewer than 500 locomotives. 500. But 200 million is the population, of which 20% are operational. Okay, so that's actually worse than what it was in the 1980s when the population was actually considerably less. By 2013, there were 1,434 coaches. In the 1980s, they loaded on average 600,000 freight wagons. By 2014, the number was down to 76,300. Right? So you can't get worse than where they currently are. But then you bring in China. China's actually been a disaster. They bought these diesel engines. They've consistently failed. And a number of years ago, the Chinese didn't even bring in equipment that had the right gauge. So in terms of rail, Pakistan is like pretty much in the Jurassic, and China doesn't really seem to be stepping up the confidence that they're going to be able to deliver what they say. And for reasons I discussed repeatedly, Gwadar is not likely to fructify in any policy-relevant future. So what are the implications of this? I think the benefits are largely going to accrue to China. When you look at the fact that it takes 4 to 6 times the cost to move a barrel of crude from Gwadar to Kashgar through that route than it does any other GLOC, this means it's not economically viable. So this raises the very real concern that I think all of us have, that this is actually, Gwadar is about China having a military presence. And I think when you go through, when you crunch the economics of it, it's very hard to conclude otherwise. This is kind of a joke, right? I mean, no one wants to park in Gwadar because it's just not economically viable. Having said that, the economic constraints will probably also limit the time frame when China can park an aircraft carrier. I understand there's some bogus picture floating around of a Chinese aircraft. It's so friggin' bogus. If that thing were there, y'all would have been freaking out. We have 2 battle carrier groups we would have been freaking out. I just came back from PACOM and CENTCOM. They would have been like, oh my God, did you see this? So that thing is called a hoax. Having said that, maybe in 20 years it might be there. I don't know. I'm still concerned, I'm still confused about the Indian concerns about the KKH, because this is basically what's always been there since the 60s. I also want to assure you, and you don't know what happens in this election, because we have a lunatic, and I think Trump is a lunatic. If you think Hillary's a lunatic, then we can't see eye to eye. She has other problems, but she's not a lunatic. It doesn't matter. I'm just going to finish it very briefly. This is not going to spur it's not plugged in. I think it's just gonna, unless it's plugged in, it's just gonna sleep. Don't worry about it. I'm actually just finishing. So the U.S. has a very funny relationship, and anyone who's spent time in Afghanistan knows this, with China, in Pakistan and Afghanistan. So many Indians say, well, this is going to make the United States appease Pakistan even more. To which I say, we're already asymptotically appeasing them. We can't really appease them more. And in fact, on the money side, we're pulling back. So in this area, in Afghanistan and Pakistan, we have a very different view of China. We know that we don't have the tenacity, the willpower, or the finances to continue footing the bill for the fiasco in Afghanistan. So we're actually hoping that the Chinese will exert its influence. We're actually hoping that in Afghanistan and Pakistan, the US and China are more in alignment than not, right? We actually want China to build a railway in Afghanistan. Because if there is no railway, how does all that stuff from Anak, if it ever gets out of the ground, get to a market? And if Afghanistan doesn't have a railway, and if it can't get its natural resources to a market, how can it pay for itself? Because my country's not going to keep paying, right? So this is a fact. We just can't. We can't keep paying for this country in perpetuity. There's no political will for it. So we're looking for other partners. And the Chinese, and again, I'm going to be very crass, but also blunt and truthful. There's no country in the world that doesn't care if its citizens get killed building a railroad, right? In my country, if 100 miners die in a mine disaster, it is a matter of congressional hearings. It's a big deal. In China, when 100 people die in a mine disaster, it's called Tuesday. So in terms of countries, and of course these are nationalized businesses, right? In terms of the risk-accepting countries, you're not going to do it, right? Who's going to do it? We're hoping that China is going to pick up. Right now, they're basically a free rider, right? We fought the last Marine to make China, Afghanistan safe for Chinese exploitation. So we're hoping that they're actually going to follow, that they're going to get in and do this exploitation business. We're also hoping that as Pakistan becomes more dependent upon China, that China's counterterrorism interests, and believe it or not, a long-term Pak-Indian no-war interest, will constrain Pakistan's behavior. And this is, I know, very funny, because we also hate China in other parts of the world. And this is because of the way our combatant commands are divided. So CENTCOM sees a different view of China than what PACOM does. And in our interagency process, CENTCOM doesn't get to tell PACOM, we actually don't view them as the bad guys here, right? So this is one of the ways in which our bureaucratic divisions makes it difficult to rationalize our relationship with China. China doesn't have this problem, right? This is something that's unique with the way our country divides up military and also diplomatic issues. So I'm gonna leave that there. And question, answers, anything on this or else? Yeah.
Great talk. One area we did talk about at the triangle where Afghanistan is there, Pakistan is there. What's the China-Iran equation?
I'm really glad. Oh God, I'm so glad you raised that because I actually meant to, but I forgot. Because I'm actually very blind and my print's very small and it was dark. So I've written quite a bit about Indian-Iranian relations because I was actually very bullish. I thought that if India were in Iran while the Americans were still putzing about, that India could basically pull the China, the Pak-China analogy. And India, and I didn't really see this coming because India likes to have its independent foreign policy. I didn't anticipate how much India would actually follow U.S. dictation on Iran. I didn't see it coming. I thought you guys are independent foreign policy. No, but you didn't. You basically caved. And so after Iran came under sanctions, you guys really withdrew from Chabahar. And China moved right in. And my colleague, I haven't been to Iran in many years, and I'm not sure I'll be able to go anytime soon because now my profile is just different. I'm not sure if they let me in. But my collaborator, Smita Katti, has been, and she spent a lot of time in Gwadar. Chabahar. Chinese are all over Chabahar. And the Iranians told her very bluntly, if y'all don't get your tails into gear, we will let China do this. And so my plea, and I also know from the American side, they won't say this publicly, but they'll say it to me, and they'll say it on email, we really hope the Indians get their butts into gear, because we want the Indians at Chabahar, not the Chinese. So I think it's very unfortunate that India actually followed the American dictation on Iran, because I think in the long run, we both have really been harmed by it. Does that answer your question? And I also am optimistic. Years ago, I said during a congressional hearing, we should be moving stuff through Chabahar. And the congressperson said, but Iran's a nuclear proliferating state-sponsored terror. And I said, sir, what the hell is Pakistan? I was so stupefied by his answer. And he looks at me, and it was very clear, that had not dawned on him. I said, but at that point, we had only shoved $20 billion down Pakistan's throat. Now the number has creeped to, I said, so you can't figure out a way of moving water and fuel into Afghanistan? How about the Italians can do it? They don't hate the Iranians. So, that's a whole other issue. I mean, one could argue that we lost the war when we went to war with Pakistan, which has been my view, Shiruse. You can't go to war with the one country that once you lose. It's like setting up a daycare and having a pederast in charge, right? That's exactly what we did. Oh, well, this pederast is very qualified. Let's have him run this chain of daycares. He'll probably hire other pederasts. That's exactly what we did. So what I am hoping is that as we move away from Pakistan, and we definitely are, we're far less indulgent of this. And interestingly enough, I'm going to tell you a backstory. Are we on or off record here? Okay, so years ago, and Indians misunderstood it. I did this, you are a pro-Pakistan? Like, no, I'm not. I'm actually a data person. But years ago, I'd argued that we should offer Pakistan a conditions-based nuclear deal. Everyone misunderstood it. It wasn't because we were going to offer them a deal, because they would never satisfy the conditions. But it would be so embarrassing that we put all of this human capital on the table, and they told us to go bugger off, that we would be then pissed. And then we would realize that Pakistan is a rent-seeking state and nothing more, no potential of change, and we have nothing to give it. That's exactly what happened, right? And I was thinking about writing a piece saying, I told you so, and do a victory lap, but I thought that would be not nice. So Pete Lavoie, who thought, he's never met a Pak general that he couldn't whisper to. For you guys know the dog, he's a terrible fraud, by the way. Don't ever listen to the dog whisperer. He's a fraud. He shouldn't even have his TV show. But Pete Lavoie thought he was the general whisperer, and he thought he could deliver to the Obama administration on its way out a deal with Pakistan where they would limit the deployment of theater nuclear weapons, obviously limit the production of fissile material. And both Sharifs pretty pretty much gave him, the middle finger. And actually, this had the effect that I thought it would. Pete Lavoie is pissed, right? Because his personal name, everyone knew he was the father of this idiotic idea. And it's actually been Pete Lavoie who's been behind getting tough on Pakistan. When the Pakistanis, the whole thing about Congress, you can buy F-16s, but we're not giving you the money. Or in the past, before this nuclear deal went sour and Pete looked like a fool, the Obama administration was like, well, we really got to figure out a way to help these guys get these F-16s. That didn't happen this time. And then you'll also see Alan Kronstadt publishes regularly the monetary expenditures on al-Pakistan, and you just see this steady decline. And in the latest legislation, all of those security restrictions on CSF remain. And it has a brand new name, by the way. It's no longer called CSF. And it actually ties these monies to Pakistan internal security operations. So it gets rid of this ruse that they're supporting a coalition that they've not supported from the beginning. So one of the positive externalities of Pete putting this ridiculous plan forward, although his intention was it would work, was that he was actually chastened. And I think it really did, at least in the Beltway, demonstrate, as I predicted it would, the limits of what we could do for this country. And this was very, very sobering. I think a lot of people thought, well, they can't say no to this. Well, of course they can say no, because actually if they didn't have nuclear weapons, and they didn't have jihadis, they couldn't scare the world into continuing to pay their bills, right? So it's like they're not going to let go. They have an army that can't win a war, right? They have nukes they can't use, and so their options are basically nuclear coercion with jihadis. Why would they ever give that up? And so I can tell you, across the government, there's an understanding of this. And no matter what the crazy folks say on your television, one candidate gets this country very well, and that's Secretary, not Hillary Clinton, right? She's the only Secretary of State that went to Pakistan, told them to their faces in a room of people, your country raises snakes, expecting they only kill their neighbors. Yeah. And then Secretary Kerry, don't even get me started on that clown, right? So she's been the only one that actually understands the depths of perfidy, right? So I'm also hoping that as Iran comes out of these sanctions, that Iran is going to have more resources. And I think there's a greater understanding that the US, India, and Iran and Afghanistan have more in common than Pakistan and its consortium of lunatics like Saudi Arabia. Yes, any other questions? Yeah.
This is my question relates to the future of Pakistan and also the nexus, the Sino-Pak nexus. Its logic. Considering the fact that Pakistan is refusing to do away with the use of jihadism, for their as an instrument of policy. It's not giving up. You give one logic, whether it's vis-a-vis Afghanistan, whether it's India. So there is actually a kind of a convergence of interests between India, US, Afghanistan, even China,
yes,
vis-a-vis India, and Iran.
Yes.
So why don't we all put our act together and compel Pakistan to delegitimize this awful instrument that they're using, which is destroying themselves?
But on that particular day, literally the day she was killed, all of us that study Pakistan, we got phone calls from the Chinese embassy, and they basically floated this. They said, look, we have strategic issues that are really quite different, but on Pakistani internal security, we need to be on the same page. And but they told all of us, and what I've heard subsequently in dealing with Chinese diplomats, because their relationship with Pakistan is so multifaceted, it cannot be as if they're in a consortium that's anti-Pakistan. And so from the Chinese point of view, it's about managing the optics. And I would also argue that you would have a similar domestic problem. I still see a lot of anti-Americanism. The signing of the Lamoa, it just allows refueling. It's like, I don't know where they get these crazy ideas. So I would bet if ever this became public, that India, China, and the United States and Iran were a part of this consortium, howls, and those Mombatiwalas, needlessly killing Mombatis, would also howl and scream. And in my country, if it ever came to the light that we were engaging with Iran on counterterrorism issues in Pakistan, you know who would start howling, right? The APAC folks, the folks that think Israel can do no wrong, and somehow think that Saudi Arabia is less heinous than Iran. So you are absolutely correct but I also think that not to mention what the Iranian optics would be, right? Colluding against a Muslim brother, especially given the sectarian crap that's going on between Iran and all the Sunni states. So you are 100% correct, but I also suspect, in fact, I'm trying to write a grant to do precisely this, so let's talk. But it has to be done very chukar say, and it has to be done track 3, not track 2, not track 1.5. So I'm just actually working on a grant to do this. But you can see if ever this became public, this would be combustible in all 4 of the countries politically. And at some point or another, all of us are going through some, not China, they could care less, but all of us are going through some kind of election at one point or another when this would be a cudgel that someone would get pummeled with. The timing of it would be very hard. But you're right, you're 100% right. You're always too kind.
If I may ask, throw some light on one aspect, that is in relation to Kushat 1 and 2. We remember the Muzaffarabad earthquake, which was a lot of damage. And there was information rest of the Europe that those centrifuges which were operating there, 70,000 RPM and so on, were badly damaged. And that affected production of fissile material and so on. On the other hand, we have these figures of frenetic nuclear weapon production in Pakistan. So could you throw some light on that and how reliable all this is? Because keeping in mind the fact that it assists Pakistan in their image building to suggest to the world that they are improving their nuclear capacity, weapon capacities a lot. And on the other hand, where are these figures coming from? What are the authenticity?
I can't, so I heard the same thing. You would expect those centrifuges are really fragile. You'd expect that some of the cascades would crash. So I don't know if they did or they didn't. But I think your larger question is really spot on. So if you track Pakistani leaks about how dangerous their nuclear arsenal is, it really corresponds to breaks in U.S.-Pakistan relations. So one of the first leaks about their theater nuclear weapons came during the time of the Raymond Davis crisis, followed by the Osama raid at Abbottabad, and then there was the Sahala thing. So if you actually track when there's a big burst of information, look how dangerous and scary we are, it's actually when the Americans are actually thinking about kicking them. And I am so cynical that I actually believe they're lying. Because without this belief, okay, and so here's the other thing about their nuclear weapons, which I'm sure you appreciate more than anyone else because you are coerced by them. So if Pakistan knows that we are scared crapless of terrorists getting these weapons. They also know that tactical theater nuclear weapons need to be forward deployed for them to be operationally useful per their doctrine. This also means they're most vulnerable to theft. So the more Pakistan exaggerates how dangerous they are, oh look, give us more money, and make sure that you don't declare us a state sponsor of terror. And I'm going to tell you, it's actually true. I mean, the Americans, we all understand that, I assure you, most Americans of consequence understand the Pakistan problem. We're not all stupid. And that the issue is, we disagree on the costs and benefits and the risks of different policies. So from the American point of view, they don't want, and they also misread history in a really grotesque way. So they will say, well, we learned from the 1990 sanctions that it didn't stop Pakistan from testing, and then we had the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. To which I say, one, they had a nuclear weapon in 1980. How did applying sanctions in 1990 stop that? It's like using a condom after you're already pregnant. It makes no sense. Those sanctions could never have stopped Pakistan from having, because they already had a weapon, right? So they misread history because they don't know this history Sharuse. And secondly, just because we sanctioned Pakistan didn't mean that we hand our Afghan policy to the Pakistanis, which is exactly what we did. We got the heck out, we sanctioned them, and said, just do what you want to do in Afghanistan. So they've learned the wrong lessons of 1990. And it's very difficult to crack this ossified fiction, which now passes for fact amongst policymakers. I've done my best, but it's so pervasive, and they're so risk averse. So what they will say is, okay, let's do a thought experiment. What if we declare Pakistan to be a state sponsor of terror? And then what if some of these weapons fall into the hands of evildoers, and there's something terrible that happens in New York City or Washington, D.C.? Then they imagine what the congressional hearing is going to be. And then there's going to be some idiot, not so dissimilar from Trump. This happened because we declared Pakistan to be a state sponsor of terror, right? Now, I have a very different view. I'm like, okay, you say you're a responsible user, a responsible nuclear weapon state. So if something happens, we make you responsible, right? So if one, and we know your nuclear signature because of the Khan affair and Iran and Libya. So if your stuff ends up blowing up our people or that of our allies, we're going to respond per our nuclear doctrine. And it will suck to be you, right? So instead of putting the responsibility of policing their arsenal on us, it should be on them, right? The consequences of them failing to secure should be on them, not on us. And that takes away from them their coercive capability to continue getting money from us. So now we're in the worst case scenario of we're subsidizing the very things that we hate most. But I will also tell you that there's not a single congressperson, now or later, that is going to be willing to do what I suggest because they're risk averse and they just want to get through their term without something literally blowing up. I would also argue you have the same constraint. We have no appetite either. So I think if you think about the political constraints, you quickly understand that we come to a similar place for very similar reasons.
Mr. Fair, are there any ways available to call Pakistan's bluff without risking an escalation of tensions?
What I just suggested. So, from an American point of view, I think that we have to. So, my argument is all the money that we've spent has bought us no influence, right? Under our watch and under our checkbook, they've proliferated to tactical nuclear weapons. Now, we can debate the amount of this, but we can't debate that they're moving in that direction. And one thing, what I learned in my book, from reading all of their craziness, they believe it's not what they actually possess. It's what the world thinks they may possess. That's their bargaining tool. It's game theory 101, right? If you actually know someone doesn't have something, you can actually kick them. If you don't know, what's underneath my burqa, you don't know what I'm going to do, right? So that's an elemental part of their strategy, is fostering insecurity and instability through uncertainty, right?
Isn't that what Saddam tried after?
What?
Isn't that what Saddam Hussein tried with chemical weapons?
Well, actually, Saddam, no.
I mean, saying that he created the impression that he had it all along.
You mean nuclear weapons?
Yeah.
Well,
Nuclear.
Saddam was in exactly that same dilemma, right?
Yeah.
It's very difficult to prove a negative. How does he prove he doesn't have them? But if he could, then he would have exposed to Iran that he didn't have them after all. And then he miscalculated. He thought that if they thought we had nuclear weapons, then they won't invade. So he was exactly in that dilemma. And it turns out, I'm pretty sure everyone knew they didn't have nuclear weapons. But that's a whole, we just wanted to invade for other reasons. So I think it is possible. But the thing is, there's risk. And the way the American policymaker, and I'm going to argue yours is the same way, because politicians are politicians first. The example I give is parking meters, which I don't, I haven't seen parking meters in India yet, and we don't have them anymore, so it's a dying critter. But it used to be you put a quarter in a parking meter, and you're supposed to get 15 minutes. In the Pakistani parking meter, you get 1 minute, right? But you get 1 minute. If you change the policy, maybe you'll get negative 15 minutes, right? And so when you have a risk-averse policy environment, and there are very risk-averse with these issues, you're not going to get changed. I believe it is possible, but it requires a political will, and when you have democracies, as we do, when you have separation of powers, it's not what the president wants, right? It's what Congress wants. And so having coordination, and that's just a lot of people whose equities you have to breach. And so it is very possible, theoretically, but I would argue it's impossible politically for the same reasons you have here we have in the States. Yeah.
In the same context, why does China, in terms of its motivations, China continue to expand Pakistan's nuclear weapons capability by adding on to these plutonium using nuclear power stations? They're going gung-ho with more and more capacity, and thus providing Pakistan with the ability to produce more plutonium-based weapons to fan their paranoia.
Right. So this is a really important question, and the answer is nuanced. China doesn't care about Lashkar-e-Taiba. It's not a concern because it's an organization that's on a leash, right? Lashkar-e-Taiba doesn't kill Chinese. Lashkar-e-Taiba does nothing in Pakistan. It kills in Afghanistan and it kills in Pakistan. Or excuse me, it kills in Afghanistan and it kills in India. So when you look at how China views the jihadi menagerie, it only cares really about that intersection of groups that interfere or support the ETIM. So that's and also incidentally, that's what Pakistan cares about, right? It cares about the Pakistani Taliban. And so if you look at the Venn diagram, there'd be no Pak Talibs if there were no Jaish-e-Mohammed, if there were no Afghan Taliban. So there is an overlap in Pakistani and Chinese interests. It's larger than the overlap between your and Pakistan's interests or the US and Pakistan's interests, but it's still there. So China doesn't actually care if it uses its nuclear umbrella to bully you with Lashkar-e-Taiba. It doesn't. In fact, that serves China's interest because it wants you to be constantly worrying about your reckless neighbor to the west. That's why, for example, it takes enormous political pressure to get them to prescribe LET, right? It hasn't prescribed JUD. And it doesn't matter what JUD does, it won't prescribe it. I don't know what it would take for them to prescribe JUD. Because it doesn't kill off leash. It's a proxy that's very much online. So the reason why it does what it does is that it actually empowers Pakistan to do what benefits China. And that's the beauty in some sense of the Pakistan-Chinese relationship heretofore. China's never asked Pakistan to do anything other than what Pakistan would want to do. What makes Pakistanis concerned is that what China does not want is that its client state, to whom it's given all of this nuclear assistance, ends up having a nuclear weapon go missing and something blows up somewhere, particularly in China. So what Pakistan fears is that as it becomes more beholden to China through CPEC, that China might actually want it to clamp down more capaciously on these Deobandi groups. And that's why you see some resistance about what the end game is with CPEC. But to your larger question, right now, that benefits China. What doesn't, the end point where the benefit begins to become a detriment is if something totally irresponsible in China's view happens for which it has to answer. Kind of like its dilemma with North Korea, right? It doesn't want Pakistan to be North Korea, although I think some of us would say that it is. So that's not a comforting answer, but it's a blunt answer. Any over here? Any ladies? No ladies? Really? I don't want to be a sexist. This gentleman over here, I also don't want to be only a rightist.
Regarding this particularly Gwada port, there is a corridor available from China to Gwada. But for us, the Chabahar, we don't have any corridor where to go to sea and all.
That's not true.
Will it affect that much care regarding this Gwada all the matter?
Oh no, so with all due respect, you're wrong about Chabahar. Actually, Chabahar is thoroughly integrated with road and rail links going all the way up through Iran, and it's also connected to the ring road in Afghanistan. And in fact, it's already functional to some degree, and economically it's more viable, right? So that goes back to why do I say that CPEC isn't about economics and Gwadar is really about military, because you'd have to be a lunatic to put your crap off at Gwadar, right? Why would you? Other than someone who's Chinese, why would you want to put anything there, right? So actually, even Bandar Abbas and Chabahar are more cost effective when you figure in security than Gwadar. So that's already there. In terms of the economics, they've already lost out, which is why China was so interested in displacing India at Chabahar, right? And then that doesn't matter. They win whether they eat their cake or they have it. They get to do both. And that's why the Americans, although they won't tell you this, but they'll tell me this, is like, get the goddamn Indians in gear before the Chinese build Chabahar. But it's already integrated, right? A lot of you have been to Iran, right? Iran's like a totally normal country. It's just that there's a bunch of lunatics running it, and women wear penguin suits. But in terms of the logistical infrastructure, it's like any other country. Roads are nice. I don't know. It's maybe like Paris, or it's like France in some way. It's not nearly as undeveloped as some people think. So it's already there. Just get that thing expanded, and make sure that you make sure you're there before the Chinese get any more influence in Chabahar. Fart. Oh, this fellow back here in the glasses. Yes.
Hello. I'm a bank folks. I hope it works. What is your view on the proposition that Pakistan is on its way to becoming the 23rd province of China?
Well, you know what? So be it. The Chinese want to take on that problem. God bless them. And I'm not being facetious. I mean, I think the Americans would be very happy. You want to take this hot soup sandwich and have it for lunch? College you. So, I don't care, because actually the Chinese will be more rough with them than we will, right? Because at the end of the day, they want them to be a proxy, right? They want them to calibrate the level of antagonism with India, but not to a point where it spoils over. It's sort of like Zia in Afghanistan. And the more China integrates Pakistan into its tentacles, the more control it's going to exert over it. And the funny thing is, Pakistanis don't resent that, like they resent being told what to do by the Americans. They will resent it eventually, 6 decades later. But I don't think that's a bad thing. It might be bad for you, but A, it's not going to happen. But B, the more control that China has over Pakistan, I think we actually benefit from it. Even though China does other things elsewhere in the world that's very disquieting. I also don't want to be an ageist. The young man in the vest.
Thank you, Christina. Watched a lot of your presentation. Big fan of things you have to say. Once while watching one of your YouTube videos, I ended up watching about 100 hours of Pakistani news programs and so on and so forth. Long story short, the overwhelming impression, not being a strategist, just a normal citizen, was that we should just leave them alone. They have so many, huge amount of paranoia, so many blind spots in society. They just want eating themselves up. So that had the overall impression that just leave them alone as much as we can. But my question to you is, from India's perspective, for the next 5 to 10 years, how do you see we should have a posture towards Pakistan? Any thoughts or comments on that?
So I'm a hawk, right? The thing that really strikes me in looking at how India has engaged Pakistan, really, should we say, they've been afraid of it, which is really interesting to me, because from all measures of national power, you trump them, yet you treat them like an equal. And whether it's dealing, I don't know how to articulate it. It's like, well, we can't have cold start because Pakistan has nuclear weapons. I'm like, well, y'all have nuclear weapons. I assure you, no Pakistani has ever said, well, you know, those Indians, we better not do a terrorist attack there in Delhi because they got nuclear weapons. No Pakistani has ever said that. Ever. Ever, 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 ever. You'll never hear it. Well, the Indians have nuclear weapons, therefore we should. They never do. So what I find it really interesting that the Indians are always afraid of Pakistan. That if we do something, then something terrible is going to happen. But the one lesson I learned from history was the one time when Pakistan was reasonably well behaved for some time, actually was after you vivisected it in 1971. Right? The only thing that recuperated Pakistan, now by the way, but that wasn't what spurred their nuclear weapons program. This is also bad history. Zulfikar wanted nuclear weapons as early as 1964. And the reason was, anyone know why? Lop Nor, right? Zulfikar knew, because of the 62 war in Lop Nor, that India would eventually have a nuclear weapon. and he wanted to pursue it. Why am I blanking? Ayub said no. If we need a weapon, we'll get it from an ally off the shelf. And so Zulfikar, after the 71 war, was finally in a position to do what he always wanted to do. So they didn't start pursuing nuclear weapons because they lost Bangladesh. But if you look historically, Pakistan was actually, and there's data that show this, the correlates of war data show that after Pakistan was vivisected, for many years, it was actually well behaved. I mean, it didn't start taking pungas with India until the Khalistan insurgency, right? So you actually had 13 years of Pakistan being relatively well behaved, right? And I would argue that what Pakistan probably needs is a proper defeat, right? And so when I saw Cold Start come out, I was like, alhamdulillah, finally the Indians are, growing some stuff down there. And they're going to, because you take Sialkot, then you force them to concede. And unfortunately, I think the other problem that you guys did at 71 is that you won it on the battlefield, but you gave all of it up at Shimla. The only country, you won this magnificent war, and then you basically, snatched victory from the defeat from the jaws of victory. So I'm a hawk. I believe that Pakistan will continue doing what it does until it no longer benefits from doing it. I also believe that all of this stuff about negotiations is complete rubbish. You negotiate when you actually think you have a negotiating partner, right? I don't care what Nawaz Sharif says. He's the wrong Sharif, right? And when India agrees to hold talks, how does that play out domestically? What Pakistan then says to its people, see, the Indians agree that there's something to discuss. I've also been sort of disappointed in the MEA because they should be saying what I said on my YouTube video, right? You want to execute fully what UN Security Council Resolution 47 says? Do it, dudes, right? Demilitarize your part of Kashmir, which they absolutely can't do, right? So India, I think, is too nafis. I'm not sure that's a word that's used down here. They're too nice, too delicate, and what you really need to do is put some boxing gloves and pound these buggers. I mean, Pakistan gets away with what it does, and that's why it continues to do it. And unfortunately, so Manmohan Singh didn't do anything, but he also didn't say he was going to do anything. Modi, from an outsider's point of view, has said he's going to do a lot of things, has done nothing. And so let's take, for example, the fiasco last summer in Myanmar. And all of the neighbors better take note. Well, Pakistan did take note. And what did it do? It did Gurdaspur. After Gurdaspur, what happened? What was the next attack after Gurdaspur? No, there was another one. Udhampur. Right? Then you had Pathankot, which was such a great fear. Nothing happened. So my fear is that after the Balochistan talk, and the Pakistanis are furious, they've actually made it increasingly difficult to get Indian radio broadcasts. My fear is that Pakistan's going to answer the Balochistan speech, which I'm not criticizing it, do what you need to do. But if there's no action that follows these words, Pakistan calls his bluff. And I'm just looking at my watch, when are they going to blow up something? Because that's how they've handled all of Modi's behavior. So if you're going to talk tough, you've got to be prepared to actually do something. And so that's one of the big differences between these two governments. Manmohan didn't do anything, but he also didn't say he was going to do anything. Modi has talked a big game. I think he's made India very vulnerable, right? Because what has Pakistan learned? Is that Modi says this stuff for domestic consumption, and then Pakistan can conduct something as outrageous as Pathankot. And the Gurdaspur attack would have been much more sanguinary had all of their plans actualized. So I'm kind of the wrong person. I think those Mombatis have better uses. These Aman Kiyasha people, oh dear Lord, they're page of copy. Sorry if there's any Aman Kiyasha people.
I have one question. Since you brought up these points about the boxing glove, do you think we made a big mistake in 2001 December after the parliament attack that we actually did not bash them?
Yes, you absolutely did. I mean, I also understand the Americans were howling and screaming, right? But I think you missed a huge opportunity. So yes.
Can I?
Sorry, you want to comment? We all know that the element to talk with Pakistan is the army. Everybody, including you all, have dealt with Pakistan through the army. There is a lot of talk nowadays of both the army and the ISI being embedded with a lot of officers who are of a jihadist incline. And how far is that true? And if that is true, the danger of the nukes falling into jihadist hands is far greater. What do you have to say about that?
So that's a complicated one because I'm a data person and we don't have data on this issue. I think I have the most data on this. So I had assembled a data set of Pakistan officer recruitment from 71 to 2005. Then I then took census data and economic household survey data, and I crosswalked it with this data set to see what kind of districts the Pak military is recruiting from in terms of everything that we can talk about. Then I crosswalked those districts with the large end surveys that I've done on attitudes. So if I had known this would come up, I would have had some slides for you. But there, if you go to my website, christinefair.net, I've got several publications on this, and they're just download them. They're for free, of course. But so, as Pakistan, and you can see in these maps that I have, it used to be that a majority of districts didn't produce an officer. Now it's the case that a majority do produce officers. And they have reached into Balochistan, they've reached into Sindh, and they've expanded, of course, in NWFP. Actually, Pashtuns are more overrepresented in each cohort than Punjabis are. And I'm going to say cohort because I can't talk about the composition of the force. I only have data on cohorts. So what I can say is that when I crosswalked my district army data with my survey data, they have an interesting problem. Because as they've tried to diversify their districts, they're getting more liberal districts. Districts that don't embrace the jihad nonsense. They're getting districts that don't look like the Punjab. So one of the reviewers of this paper said, well, what if they're only recruiting Punjabis from Balochistan? I said, well, first of all, I have data on this. So Punjabis in Balochistan look more like Baloch than they do Punjabis in the Punjab. Non-Punjabis in the Punjab look like Punjabis than they do their ethnics elsewhere. And the reason for that is, I think, is the provincial education system that they go through. So they can't have a free lunch. They can't both expand into these new districts and keep that sort of Punjabi jihadi nonsense. And it's always a Punjabi thing, right? So the other work I've done from this LET book that I'm doing, I also have a data set of LET activists, and I've overlaid the maps of LET production and Army production, and the maps are virtually identical. So they can't have their cake and eat it too. They can't both expand and keep this Punjabi jihadi mindset. Now, militaries, though, for those who've served it, you know better than I, they're sausage makers. So if you don't buy into what the Army wants, you may not get promoted, right? You may decide, I don't want to be a part of this thing, or you may just shut up, right? This is why you'll see very sensible people, when they take their uniform off, saying very sensible things that they would never have said in uniform, right? So it's hard to answer your question satisfactorily because we don't really have data on that. So that's one hedged answer. That at the level of cohorts, the cohorts look very different because of these geographical diversity issues. But then we know from a different, so this is sort of like the kaleidoscope, right? These flick one, well, that's one picture. Let's flick it another way. What we do know is that, and you didn't mention the other services. I'm going to argue, more so than the Army, we have to worry about the Air Force and the Navy. Because the Army, and I'm using, I forgot the author, The Masks of War. where the author talks about what are the altars at which different services worship. The Pak Army worships their nuclear weapons, right? Those nuclear weapons are what they use to coerce and compel you, coerce and compel my country, and everyone else, right? If those things are not fully in their control, they are not truly functional to the Army. And the Army actually has very good, not as good as one would like, personnel security arrangements. Where the Army falters, and this is important because you see this at these different attacks, is that you can get up to the point of being a major without a lot of scrutiny. If you get picked up for the Command and Staff College, oh, you get lots of scrutiny, is you're interacting with foreigners. So there's a black hole up to the point of major, which is why I think when you look at some of these attacks on Musharraf, the Corps Commander, you see people up to the level of major being implicit, because they have a lot of information about movements, but they're not subject to the same scrutiny. The Air Force and the Navy, if you talk to our defense attaches, they'll tell you they have, by comparison to the Army, derelict security personnel procedures. And so that is why I think you see a lot of infiltration in the Navy and also in the Air Force. So what I always tell people, stop looking at the Army, right? Think outside the Army box, because if you look at these attacks, you see Navy and you see Air Force personnel, and also you see civilians, not just people in uniform. So by focusing on the Army, we are missing a larger threat frontier that we have to be concerned about.
I feel myself quite in tune with you when you say you are a hawk. I was posted in Pakistan for 3.5 years.
That'll do it.
665 war. And I just wanted to ask you that if we were to launch a punitive strike against Pakistan in response to a terrorist attack on India, how would the US react to it?
Depends on if you did it successfully. No, I'm not joking. So what I understand is that after Mumbai, there were some options considered, striking across the LOC, some camps. And what you guys quickly learned is that Pakistani air defense was better than you thought, and that you didn't have those options. So I could be wrong in that remit, but you have to build those capabilities. And it's, your public discourse around security, it's polluted by a lot of journalists that are clueless. So it's actually really hard to know what's going on. But I think you need to build those capabilities. I think what the worst nightmare of the Americans is the following. So, and it's our fault, right? We've given them a lot of crap. And God knows I've screamed my lungs about it. But we've given a lot of crap. They're actually fairly war tested, right? They've been fighting. We can criticize what they're doing, but they've been fighting now for quite a while. I think the worst fear of the Americans is that you undertake a punitive strike, it becomes a larger issue, and you actually lose, right? Honestly, that's the worst fear, because we want you to actually win, right? That was part of this, right? I mean, I know Indians may not believe that. We actually are hoping that you're going to be the true military hegemon in this region, that you're going to be a security provider. And so I'm not joking. It depends upon whether or not you prevail. If it gets sucked into a larger war and it's a stalemate, you've actually lost. Because Pakistan views a stalemate as a victory. Right?
So let me give you
No, I'm not joking.
Last two questions, please.
Today, among non-Muslim world, China is Pakistan's #1 friend, while India remains Pakistan's #1 enemy. In this region, military considerations take precedence over commercial considerations. Whatever the aid Pakistan gets, either from America or China, they always have been using it and also used against India. In 1971 war, America did their best to protect Pakistan against India. And today, why China has become Pakistan's #1 friend? Because if Pakistan wants to defeat India, they have to isolate India from China, one. Number two, China has recently given $131 billion to Pakistan. Now they will not give it just free, they also want something in return, and that return also will be in the whatever the terms they set for Pakistan. Today, after the elimination of Russia as a superpower, America's only rival in this region is China. And America needs India's help to counter China. So in this whole sort of puzzle, how do you think that India should behave with China vis-a-vis Pakistan?
I think you should, well, you have the same problem with China that you do with us, right? That is to say, because the United States, and I think many Indians always misunderstood me. They thought I was making a pro-Pakistan argument. I'm just making a realistic argument. The reason why the Americans have engaged with Pakistan as they have since 9/11 is that we had troops in Afghanistan. And we had no other supply route except through Pakistan, right? The northern distribution route was, and you can speak this, the Russians, it was a punga with NATO. They would never let lethal materials go through the northern distribution route, that doesn't help if you're fighting a war. And then for reasons that should be well known, Iran wasn't a viable G-lock. So we were doing everything we could to keep the Pakistani A-locks. No one talks about the A-locks, the air lines of control, because even when they closed down the G-locks, the A-locks were open. So the Americans, and they fully understood, that's why I said it's the parking meter. We pay for 15, we get 1. They knew fully that they were supporting the Taliban, although they didn't know this until 2005. And between 2005 and 2007, there became an understanding of this. But for the first several years of the war, the Americans were utterly clueless. And anyone who served in Afghanistan will tell you this, is we thought that we had vanquished the Taliban. We thought we were done. We were actually going to go home. By 2007, actually, NATO ISAF had put in some guy there, the SRSG. He was known for closing missions. But obviously that's not how things evolved. So you guys were angry at us because we were serving our national interests with your enemy, while also saying, we see you as our long-term partner in this region. And you're like, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, you just gave them a bunch of F-16s and you gave them a Perry-class frigate for the Taliban that have no navy, right? I would say there's a lot of parallels that you have with China. Over the long term, you actually have more interests with China than China has with Pakistan, right? So both of you are managing each other's rise, right? So you're both rising powers, and rising powers are going to clash. I think you have the same issue that you do with the Americans, which is you want to keep your eye on the long-term ball, because you don't know if China's going to be, you don't know what China's going to rise like. It looks like a pretty nasty rise. It looks like China as a hegemon is going to look pretty friggin' nasty. But you also have a lot of commercial interests with China. So my suggestions would be is that you have to view that relationship similarly to how you view the American relationship, is that in the short term things look pretty lousy, but you have to prepare for what the long term might be. So you're constantly making these short term versus long term evaluations, which are actually really difficult to do in democracies, right? Because our parliaments churn over constantly, and we're constantly moving back and forth between parties, and whatever, it doesn't matter how great the idea was that Party X comes up with, when Party Y comes in, they jettison what Party X did. So I'm not saying it's easy, but I think those are the parallels. And then the US and India, we have a similar concern. I don't say trying to trump China. I think what the Americans want is to manage China's rise, right? We want to engage China as it rises. We want to embed China in multilateral commitments so that the dragon has a bunch of ropes on it, right? The dragon's just not running around like Godzilla. And I think India has, I think, a very similar, you want China to be integrated, and so that means engagement. So that's not a nice answer, but that's the best I can do. I see the problems, because we have the same problem. We see China as a solution in Pakistan and Afghanistan, but we see China as a threat elsewhere. So we have a similar problem of how do we think about China, not only across these different time frames, but also across the different combatant commands.
So,
that's
Steve,
my phone. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Didn't know it was on. And no one ever calls me on this phone except telemarketers trying to sell me a house over now. Yeah, it's like, yeah.
so Christine, here I have an anecdote for you and then a proposition for your hawkishness in you.
Are you one of those and Kiasha types?
No, I don't know what I am, but after I speak, then you'll get to know what I am. The anecdote is that as a 3-star I visited America and I met your vice chief.
In what year?
2003. 4.
And of what service? Because that also matters.
Army Armored Corps.
Well, I can't assume. I'm not, a fall-centric gal.
So we had something to discuss, but the moment I sat down with him, his first question was, what do you think of Musharraf? And my answer was, I don't think of Musharraf. And for the next 1 hour, we kept talking about why I don't think of him and why do you keep thinking of him. Because if you put an idiot on a pedestal and start worshipping him, he'll come and bite you. And he bit you. And of course, the 3-star was good enough to pass back to me 10 years later that generally you were right. But now here is your hawkish proposition. There is a proposal, there is a possibility that Obama may come up in the UNSGA with an NFU proposal. It's possible.
With a what? I have a bed here.
NFUs, no first use.
Oh, yes, it says no.
Let us say it comes up. If he comes up with an NFU proposal.
Is he writing to the unicorn?
No.
A unicorn to the UNGA?
It may happen. I'm just saying, it may happen, may not happen. I'm just talking about it. Why is it that if he does come up with an NFU proposal, why does America not say that threat of use is first use?
So I can't accept the premise of the question, because I don't think he is.
Or let's say even if he's not. Why is threat of use not first use in the event of a hotting situation? Because nobody wants it to be used.
So I actually can't speak to that, because
But why not? Why doesn't the world get together and say, if anybody will go to use it, we'll take it off?
Well, because we all have doctrine, and all of our doctrine has conditions under
And
which.
therefore, it's easy to say, why are you not a hawk? Because then everybody's got a doctrine.
So look, if there's different schools of thought about this. One school of thought is the world is more secure when everyone has nuclear weapons, right? And they make game theoretical arguments that are abstractly robust, right? They make all sorts of assumptions about perfect information and all this stuff. And there's obviously a school of thought that thinks it's better that we limit the number of nuclear weapon states today. This is not, I am not a global security person.
I understand. And
So it's not in my
therefore, I get to the next question. Therefore, my next question is, why does the world not say that a nuclear weapon is a nuclear weapon is a nuclear weapon? It doesn't matter whether it is theater nuclear or big nuclear or small nuclear. Please at least say that.
They do say that. I don't know who you're talking to, because there's no such thing as a tactical nuclear weapon.
Right.
Every tactical nuclear
So
weapon.
why
has
are you
strategic
getting worried
implications.
about their having it because of a cold start?
I'm not worried about it. Where did you get the sense I'm worried about it? I was like, go cold start.
Who's worried about it?
Your people are more worried about it.
I'm not sure.
I read your papers.
I might read our papers, but
I'm saying, no, I'm just saying, I see much more concern amongst Indian thinkers about cold start. Like, the people I interact with, we're hoping that you guys devise an offensive capability to put these assholes, to put these people in their place. There are certainly peaceniks that you will find, who are just afraid of every time the Pakistan army, Padmar thing, oh my God, run for cover. You'll always find those people, but I'm not one of them. I don't associate with them. I associate with a different crowd, and I would go even further. I'm very puzzled that everyone talks about conventional stability, and everyone talks about nuclear stability, or nuclear deterrence, or conventional deterrence. What I don't ever hear anyone talk about here is subconventional deterrence, right? Going back to the Pakistanis never say, well, they have nuclear weapons, therefore we shouldn't do a terror attack. You guys are, it's very puzzling, right? Because theoretically, you should be doing to Pakistan what it does to you, right? Because you have the same nuclear umbrella, right? It's a total fact. And so what I find really interesting as I read about Indian military decisions, you're the ones that fight. You're the ones tying your hands behind your back. The Americans aren't, right? So it's a puzzle to me that no one thinks in terms of some conventional deterrence, because I think you should be. If you're going to talk that game about Balochistan, you should be doing that game.
Professor,
Oh, sorry.
I must say some of us here are a little more concerned about what's happening in America
Me too.
than what's happening in Pakistan. Would you therefore please tell us what the chances are of a certain Mr. Trump moving into the White House?
My husband and I, we may be seeking asylum here. Look, I wish I could tell you it's not possible. I wish I could tell you that. I actually think he might win. Because essentially, basically, I'm going to call this like the last gasp of white power, right? So one, whether it's women's empowerment, our demands for equal pay for equal work, which you'd think would be pretty straightforward, whether it's the right to marry and love who you want to love, whether your gender or whether you marry interracially. These are, the liberals have made a lot of gains. And the problem with racist xenophobes, and I'm from a part of the country, I'm from really a pin of America where these people live, they view equal rights means they have less rights, right? And in fact, I mean, if you're going to argue that your salary is going to be equal to a woman's, okay, and if you actually are a misogynist, this is an outrage that this idiot woman makes. It's not just me. So from your point of view, you actually are being screwed, right? Trump has empowered these people, and they are legion. And when you do these surveys, who are you voting for? They essentially privilege older people because they have landlines. And Trump actually is being supported by young, middle-class white males who are threatened by their loss of supremacy. And they're not going to say, hey, you're not going to get him on the phone. There's also some embarrassment about admitting that you're a racist misogynist who wants to build a wall, right? I mean, they should be embarrassed is because they should be embarrassed. But they don't want to be judged by the person doing the survey. So I think the polls are wrong. And I think that when people get behind that boat, behind that booth, and no one's watching them, they're going to vote for this jerk. I'm also worried about our election being hacked. So this is actually, I believe this. I mean, India should be, you all should be sending election monitors to my computer. And I'm not joking. I actually, NDI, IRI, everyone, because your voting machines, your electronic voting machines, you have a paper record, right? So you can do an independent tally. Believe it or not, ours do not. And they're online. Right? Otherwise, how do you upload the outcomes? Our machines are hackable. And there are lots of organizations that's been hacking our machines. And if you have this tangerine hell beast telling Putin to hack the DNC's email, which is astonishing. And then today, apparently, the news cycle was that he was blabbing the contents of his, of his security briefing. I mean, I think this guy is actually a menace. I believe he is a tool of Putin. I don't necessarily mean that he's on Putin's payroll, but his business interests with Russia are so complete. I actually do think he is the closest to a Manchurian candidate we have ever seen. So I'm scared shitless. There's no other way of putting it. And even if he loses, I'm going to submit to you the loss in civil rights, we've been set back decades. Because he's CNN, all of these idiot boxes that I want to beat with a club, but that won't do anything. They've mainstreamed him. It's now normal to say the stuff he says about women, the stuff he says about Mexicans. And these Indians that support Trump, there is a special place in Nuttup for those people. And, and I feel bad for them that they could be so disillusioned and delusional there was 2 separate Sardars who walked into a Trump rally with a turban. Now, I never want violence or discrimination to be experienced by anyone, but what do you think happened to those Sardars and their turbans? They got the shit kicked out of them. But I'm saying to these Sardars, you chose a party that is running on a platform on racial profiling, and you didn't think was going to be racially profiled? I mean, you are really ekadam bevakoof. Then there was a terrible story of this 23-year-old Desi American. He went into a Trump rally. He's got long hair. He's like, he's like a hipster kid. He had his T-shirt, Trump 2016. Guess what happened to him? He got kicked out. At least he came to his senses. He's not voting for Trump because he's like, but then again, kid, you are voting for a party that runs on a platform of racial platforming. What the hell is wrong with you? So you can't. The stuff that he has normalized. If you look at the Southern Poverty Law Center, the Klan, the KKK, has expanded. Right? It was on the run. It was retrenching. Now it's okay to be David Duke.
Senate, yes, like
He's
run for the
running.
Senate. It's crazy.
The Grand Wizard is running for Senate. So even if Trump loses, we have these racist, xenophobic, and they can't tell a Muslim from a Hindu. I don't care if some I don't know, Sungi rolls up in a saffron pug, he's going to get beaten too. So I'm terrified. I'm so terrified of what's going to happen. I will probably break doctor's orders, and I'm going to be sitting there with a straw and a single malt. I'll either wake up dead or in immigration. Thank you.
I stand here just to very quickly propose a vote of thanks. Hi, wow. We could have gone for another couple of hours, I guess. But all the good things need to come at end at some stage. Thank you so much. Thanks for making it so informative and so insightful. I should also thank all those who asked the questions and kept it very, very interactive. There are many ambassadors and generals and air marshals in the audience today who made it very, very relevant for the rest of us to kind of make it very, very interesting. May I now request Mr. Abhay Firodia, who is the former president of MCCI, to please give a token of appreciation to Professor Fair. So, thank you, Sohani and Air Marshal Gokhale, for interacting with Professor Fair and making sure that she is able to come over to Pune and address this lecture for all of us. So huge thanks to both of you. I must add out of thanks to the Maratha Chamber of Commerce, especially Wing Commander Shalak Gandhiji, if you're around, and thank you for that, and also all the colleagues at PIC for making the program happen today. Thanks goes to each and every one of you who came here and made it possible. Thank you so much, and see you again in the next program by any one of us 3 organizations. Thank you. Bye-bye.